I thank God the old hag isn't here." That was the exact sentence I heard as I stepped onto the decorative brick porch of my daughter's suburban home. I froze instantly, my hands tightly gripping the heavy glass dish of homemade sweet potato casserole. My name is Jennifer Matthews. I am 65 years old, a widow of 10 years, and until that precise second, I truly believed my only daughter Sarah wanted me at her Thanksgiving dinner table. I had intentionally arrived 30 minutes early to help her set up the dining room. I didn't knock immediately. Through the slightly cracked living room window, I heard her husband David chuckle loudly. "You lucked out. We don't have to hear her complain about the turkey being too dry or the music being too loud." Sarah laughed. It was a loud, genuine laugh that cut right through the chilly autumn air. "I know. Plus, she always wears those outdated, tacky sweaters. David's parents would judge us all night if they saw her." Telling her dinner was at 7 instead of 5 was an absolute stroke of genius. I stood motionless on the welcome mat. The freezing November wind bit fiercely at my cheeks, but I refused to cry. My chest tightened with a quiet, heavy realization settling permanently over my heart. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had actively, maliciously plotted to exclude me, wanting to keep me away until their important guest, David's wealthy, status-obsessed parents, had finished eating. I looked down at the casserole dish in my hands. I had spent 2 painstaking hours baking it from scratch because Sarah always claimed it was her absolute favorite childhood dish. Without making a single sound, I bent down and placed the dish carefully beside the large, decorative pumpkins near the front door. I turned around, walked slowly down the driveway, and got back into my Honda. I didn't slam the car door. I simply started the engine and drove away into the evening. My phone remained silent on the passenger seat. They wouldn't even notice I was missing for another 2 hours. A strange, powerful sense of calm washed over me. I wasn't devastated. I was entirely done. What do you do when the child you sacrificed everything for treats you like an embarrassing secret? The house felt completely different when I walked back inside. It wasn't lonely, just wonderfully quiet. I put my winter coat away in the hall closet and walked straight into the kitchen. I didn't bother cooking anything extravagant. I made myself a simple turkey sandwich, poured a glass of unsweetened iced tea, and sat down. It was Thanksgiving evening, but I didn't need a massive feast to feel full. At exactly 7:15, my cell phone vibrated aggressively on the kitchen counter. Sarah's name flashed brightly across the screen. I didn't pick up. I simply watched the screen go dark, knowing she was leaving a voicemail. A minute later, I tapped the play button. "Mom, why is your casserole dish sitting on the porch?" David's mom almost stepped on it in the dark. "Everyone is confused. You didn't even knock on the door." This is really passive-aggressive behavior. "Call me back immediately so we can figure out what your problem is." I deleted the message with one swipe. There was absolutely no panic in her voice, no worry that I might have been hurt in an accident or sick. Just pure annoyance that my invisible presence had caused a minor inconvenience to her perfect evening. I sat at my small dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me. When my husband passed away, I promised myself I would do everything in my power to give Sarah a comfortable life. That included paying the monthly lease on her luxury SUV because David insisted he needed his money for investments. It included paying the exorbitant annual fees for their country club so they could network with the right people. I had been quietly draining my own retirement savings to fund their prestige while they hid me away like an ugly, broken piece of furniture. I didn't shed a single tear. Crying would mean I felt helpless, and I was far from it. I walked into my home office, turned on my desktop computer, and pulled out my financial ledgers. The numbers stared back at me, forming a clear map of my misplaced generosity over the last decade. It was time to aggressively rewrite that map. Tomorrow was Friday. The banks would be open. How fast could a perfect lifestyle collapse when the invisible foundation is suddenly pulled away? Friday morning arrived with a crisp, clear sky and a biting chill. I brewed my morning coffee deeply, savoring the bitter warmth before opening my laptop on the kitchen island. I immediately logged into my bank's online portal. Sarah had a debit card directly attached to my primary checking account. We had set it up years ago, just for absolute emergencies. Lately, her definition of emergencies included designer shoes, high-end salon treatments, and expensive organic groceries. I clicked the card management tab. Deactivate. Confirm. It took less than 3 seconds to cut the cord. Next, I moved to the auto-pay settings. The $800 monthly payment for Sarah's luxury SUV lease was scheduled to be automatically deducted next week. I canceled it without hesitation. The $1,200 quarterly country club dues canceled. I then transferred 90% of my liquid funds into a newly opened solo savings account, leaving only enough in the primary checking to cover my own modest household bills. My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt entirely present and grounded. For years, I had foolishly believed that giving them my money was a practical way of showing a mother's love. Now I saw it exactly for what it was, a blind subsidy for their extreme arrogance. At noon, my phone rang. It was Sarah again. "Mom, are you okay? You didn't call back last night. David and I are coming over on Sunday to pick up the winter clothes I have stored in your basement. Have everything boxed up and ready by the door, please." She didn't wait for an answer before hanging up. She still thought I was the obedient pushover mother ready to fetch her items from the basement like a free storage facility manager. I looked down the hallway toward the basement door. Sarah had always treated my home as a convenient dumping ground for the things she didn't want cluttering her pristine minimalist house. Boxes of old college junk, ugly seasonal decorations, spare furniture. I smiled softly to myself. She wanted her things boxed up. I would be more than happy to oblige. Why wait until Sunday when I could deliver her harsh reality today? I didn't waste any time pondering. I marched out to the garage and grabbed a thick stack of heavy-duty black trash bags and several rolls of strong packing tape. I spent the next 3 hours dragging every single item that belonged to Sarah up from the dusty basement. I didn't bother folding anything neatly. I just aggressively shoved her old clothes, dusty, artificial Christmas trees, broken lamps, and heavy college textbooks into the bags. Once the hallway was completely full, I called a local handyman named Hector, who owned a large hauling truck. He often helped folks around the neighborhood with moving heavy yard waste and appliances. "Hector, are you available for a quick local drop-off right now?" I asked. "Sure thing, Mrs. Matthews." "What are we moving today?" he replied cheerfully. "About 15 heavy garbage bags and a few ugly chairs. I'll pay you double your usual hourly rate if you can come immediately." Within 45 minutes, Hector and his teenage son were loading the heavy black bags onto the back of his rusty pickup truck. I gave him Sarah's address in her upscale gated community. "Just leave every bit of it right on her front lawn," I instructed, handing him a crisp $100 bill. "You don't want us to ring the doorbell and tell them?" he asked, raising a confused eyebrow. "No." I smiled pleasantly. "Just stack it near the mailbox. They absolutely love surprises." I stood on my porch and watched the truck rumble down the street, carrying away the literal physical weight of my daughter's disrespect. For the first time in years, my basement was entirely empty. I walked downstairs and swept the concrete floor, breathing in the smell of dust and newfound freedom. I had finally reclaimed my space. The house felt like it belonged solely to me again. I went upstairs, poured myself another glass of iced tea, and sat comfortably by the window. I knew the exact moment Hector would arrive at her house. The neighborhood association had incredibly strict rules about trash sitting on the lawn. How long would it take for the HOA to notice the garbage bags of reality sitting on her manicured grass? The phone began to buzz frantically at exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 missed calls from Sarah. 2 missed calls from David. I let every single one of them go straight to voicemail. Finally, a text message popped up on my screen, typed entirely in panicked capital letters. Mom. The bank declined my card at the SPAY. What is wrong with your account? I picked up the phone, took a slow sip of my tea, and typed back a very simple response. My account is perfectly fine. Have a good afternoon. The phone rang immediately. This time I calmly swiped to answer. Mom! Sarah shouted, her voice echoing with a mix of severe panic and deep embarrassment. I was standing at the front desk of the club. My card was completely declined in front of everyone. Call the bank right now and fix this. There is absolutely nothing to fix, Sarah. I answered smoothly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I deactivated the card. I also canceled the auto payments for your luxury car lease and the country club membership. Silence stretched heavily over the line. I could hear her breathing heavily, processing the shock. Are you insane? She snapped furiously. The car payment is due on Tuesday. We don't have the liquid cash for that this week. Put the money back right now. No. What do you mean, no? Is this about yesterday? Because you completely misunderstood everything. David was just joking around. I heard perfectly. I stated my tone unwavering and cold. I will no longer fund the lifestyle of people who refer to me as an old hag and celebrate my absence. You and David are adults. You will pay your own bills from now on. You can't just cut me off without warning, she shrieked. I just did. I hung up the phone, a deep, settling peace wrapped securely around my shoulders. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I had spent a decade buffering her from the harsh real world, and she had rewarded me with nothing but cruelty. The protective buffer was officially gone. Tomorrow she would undoubtedly try to come over to my house to bully me back into submission. I needed to prepare for that. What is a home if you cannot properly secure the doors? Saturday morning, I flipped open the local directory and called a neighborhood locksmith. A cheerful, burly man named Gary arrived within 30 minutes of my call. Changing all the locks, Mrs. Matthews lost a house key. He asked heavily, setting his metal toolbox down on my front porch. No, Gary. I just decided it's finally time to stop letting uninvited guests walk in whenever they please, I replied. I watched closely as he efficiently replaced the old worn brass deadbolts with shiny, heavy-duty new ones. For 5 long years, Sarah had carried a spare key to my house. She used it constantly to drop off her junk, raid my pantry for expensive wine I was saving, or do her massive loads of laundry whenever her washer was acting up. It was a physical symbol of her extreme entitlement to my life and space. I paid Gary, handsomely locked the heavy front door from the inside, and simply waited. It didn't take long. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, Sarah's silver SUV aggressively pulled into my driveway. David was driving, his face set in a deep scowl. They stomped heavily up the front steps. I stood perfectly still behind the hallway wall, completely out of sight. I heard the familiar metallic clink of Sarah sliding her key into the lock. She twisted it hard. Nothing happened. She rattled the handle, violently pushing her body weight against the heavy oak wood. "It's completely jammed!" she yelled over her shoulder to David. He stepped up, rattling the brass knob aggressively. "Did she barricade the door from the inside?" he muttered angrily. I slowly stepped into the entryway and unlocked the interior deadbolt. I opened the main wooden door but left the sturdy metal security screen securely locked between us. Sarah glared at me through the dark wire mesh. "Open this door right now, Mom. Stop acting like a dramatic child." "This is my house, Sarah," I replied quietly, maintaining direct eye contact. "You don't have a working key anymore, and you won't be coming inside today." David crossed his arms, puffing out his chest to look intimidating. "Listen, Jennifer, you need to calm down. You're embarrassing Sarah in front of your neighbors." I looked at him completely unbothered. "I'm not the one throwing a loud tantrum on a porch. What exactly do you want?" "How long does it take for entitled people to realize they no longer hold any real power?" Sarah gripped the metal handle of the screen door, shaking it in frustration. "We want to talk about this insane, toxic behavior. You literally dumped trash bags full of my stuff on my front lawn. The HOA president saw it and sent us a warning. And you cut off my debit card. You need to fix the bank account right now before we miss our payments." "Your stuff is exactly that yours," I answered steadily. "My basement is not your free personal storage unit, and my money is not your monthly allowance. I am your daughter," she shouted, her face reddening with fury. "You can't do this to me over one stupid joke." "It wasn't a joke, Sarah. It was the brutal truth. You were glad I wasn't there. You think my clothes are embarrassing. You think I am a nuisance. You only want me around when you urgently need a blank check, a free babysitter, or empty storage space." David stepped forward, trying to use his usual condescending, commanding tone. "Jennifer, you're overreacting to a misunderstanding. We let you be part of our lives. We include you in our events. You purposely lied about the time of the Thanksgiving dinner to make sure I wouldn't ruin your perfect image in front of your wealthy parents." I corrected him sharply. "You don't include me. You simply tolerate me for my wallet." Sarah's eyes darted around, frantically realizing her usual manipulative tactics of whining weren't working at all. She tried a vastly different angle. "Fine. If you want to be bitter and lonely, that's your sad choice. But if you don't open this door right now and transfer the money for the car, you will never see us again. I won't call, I won't visit. You'll be completely alone for the rest of your life." She truly thought this was the ultimate devastating weapon. She fully expected me to crumble, to apologize profusely, to beg her not to abandon me. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye. I felt absolutely no fear, only extreme clarity. "Okay," I said plainly. "Goodbye, Sarah." I closed the heavy oak door right in her face and turned the deadbolt with a solid, deeply satisfying click. What happens when the threat of deep isolation is actually the promise of ultimate freedom? The silence in the house immediately after closing the door was undeniably beautiful. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel the desperate need to chase her down the driveway. I didn't frantically reach for my phone to apologize and smooth things over. I walked peacefully into the kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down at the table with my iPad. Because I had canceled their payments, I had thousands of extra dollars in my account this month. I confidently opened a travel website and booked a premium 2-week cruise to Alaska, something I had always desperately wanted to do, but constantly postponed, because Sarah needed a sudden loan for a luxury kitchen renovation. 3 quiet days passed. I received a few nasty, aggressively typed text messages from David calling me completely selfish and irrational. I silently blocked his number. Then, without a second thought, I blocked Sarah's number as well. I didn't need their constant negativity dragging my spirit down anymore. I spent my days happily gardening, reading on the porch, and having long lunches with Martha, my next-door neighbor, who noticed the stark change in me immediately. "You look significantly lighter, Jen," Martha noted, sipping her sweet iced tea on my sunny patio. "Did you lose weight recently?" "I lost about 150 pounds of dead weight." I smiled broadly, taking a crunchy bite of my salad. Meanwhile, harsh reality was hitting Sarah rapidly. On Thursday afternoon, I ran into David's mother, Eleanor, at the local pharmacy. She looked incredibly flustered and embarrassed. She couldn't help but gossip, completely unaware she was giving me exactly the information I expected. "Jennifer," she whispered, leaning in closely. "Did you hear Sarah and David are having terrible financial troubles? David begged us for a loan to cover their country club dues, and Sarah's car is a month behind. I thought you were generously helping them out." "I retired from doing charity work," I replied politely. Her eyes widened in massive shock, but I simply nodded gracefully and walked toward the checkout counter. The perfect facade they had built was violently cracking, and everyone was starting to see the ugly truth. They had built a massive castle entirely on my dime, and I had just quietly repossessed the bricks. How quickly does pride collapse when it can no longer be financially afforded? 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang hesitantly. I checked the peephole. It was Sarah, looking entirely different than she had on the porch. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore plain, faded jeans. She didn't look entitled. She looked thoroughly exhausted. I slowly unlocked the main door, but kept the heavy metal screen firmly shut. "Mom!" she pleaded, her voice shaky. "Please. The car was repossessed yesterday. David is absolutely furious. We had to cancel the club, and his parents are refusing to help us. I'm so sorry about Thanksgiving. I was stupid. We desperately need your help to get the car back." I looked closely at my daughter. I saw the sheer panic lurking beneath the frantic apology. She wasn't genuinely sorry for hurting my feelings. She was terrified because she got caught and permanently lost her unlimited funding. "Sarah," I sighed, "you aren't apologizing to your mother. You are frantically apologizing to your personal ATM, and the bank is permanently closed. You're legally and morally supposed to help me." She cried loudly, her selfish colors violently flashing again. "I helped you constantly for 10 straight years," I replied steadily. "Now it's time for you to help yourself. You are a grown adult. Learn to live strictly within your actual means." "You're going to completely lose me forever over stupid money," she demanded aggressively. "No," I replied softly. "I lost you years ago to sheer arrogance. I'm just finally acknowledging it today." I didn't wait for her to start screaming. I firmly shut the heavy door and walked away. Could she ever learn to respect me as a person, or would she only ever respect my wallet? It has been exactly 6 months since that Thanksgiving evening. I never gave them another single dime. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Sarah and David eventually had to downsize into a modest townhouse. David took a stressful weekend job, and Sarah was forced to work full-time just to pay down their mounting credit card debts. They were finally living the exact life they actually earned. As for me, I went on that incredible Alaskan cruise. I made wonderful new friends who genuinely valued my company, not the size of my checkbook. Upon returning, I updated my financial plans, ensuring my life savings would eventually go to a local shelter for single mothers. I left Sarah exactly $100 in my plans, just enough to buy herself the ingredients for a sweet potato casserole. Yesterday, I received a short, handwritten letter from Sarah. It wasn't demanding money or offering fake apologies. She simply wrote that working 40 grueling hours a week had finally made her realize how hard I had worked my entire life to provide for her. She didn't boldly ask to visit. She just stated that she finally understood. I carefully placed the letter in my desk drawer. I didn't call her back. Forgiveness happens quietly in the heart, but true trust takes years to rebuild. I am no longer waiting sadly on freezing porches. I walked out to my sunlit backyard garden, picked up my watering can, and smiled. Life is remarkably beautiful when you finally stop wasting your water on dead plants.